tell you guys about our story in Fort Wayne. We're a bit different in that we've actually built 2 curling facilities in the span of about 7 years, or actually 5.5, 6 years. So we've got tons of experience having done it twice, probably the only one crazy enough to build 2 curling facilities in that span of time. But what we're going to talk about is really our story. Everybody's club is different. Everybody has different circumstances, different desires, everything else. There's no one right answer to any of this. But as you look out as an arena club, and I remember my years in the arena world, it's a difficult model to sustain. Bad ice times, expensive ice, not able to profit from the bar sales, difficult to run bonspiels, if not impossible, difficult to run learn to curls, especially during the Olympics with the frequency that you want. So really, as you guys all know, that the goal is for basically every arena club to get to dedicated ice. People have done it in different ways. Some I've heard of a few clubs that have rented ice at a dedicated club that was nearby. That's probably the cheapest way to do this, but very low usefulness for that for a lot of clubs, especially those that aren't near another dedicated club. And if a dedicated club is within driving distance, why not just join that club? But that's the cheapest option. Sort of the dream of everybody is to build a dedicated curling facility from scratch. That's probably the best way to do it. You can design it exactly to your specifications, no compromises. The challenge is the cost. I really haven't heard of anyone able to build a facility for less than, $1.8 to $2 million plus. There probably are ways to reduce that, but it is a substantial outlay of money. Some interesting things that have happened over the last few years is clubs that have leased or bought a hockey rink. So Kalamazoo Curling Club and Peachtree are 2 examples of that. So you're getting fairly low cost, and you are relatively easy transition. You're not installing ice equipment and things of that nature, but you're compromising on, to some extent, the experience. Difficult to have a warm room just overlooking the ice. You don't get the same sort of club experience. The path we took was the warehouse model, and it's one that I think for the majority of clubs, they're going to move to dedicated ice. The warehouse model is the way for them to do it, because most clubs are not going to have the money to build a dedicated facility from scratch. And you still get, for minimally, a little bit more perhaps than the hockey rink scenario, you're able to build something. And so our first club, what I like to call our starter home, was a rented facility. We built a 3-sheet club. And after 5.5 years, after the lease was up for renewal, we happened to really get lucky and find a building for sale. Actually, it wasn't even for sale. It was vacant, but not yet on the market. 200 yards down the street. That was sort of ideal for a 4-sheet club. So by the time we completed it, it was about 7 years. Let's see, 2019. So 5.5 years. So 5.5 years after opening the first facility, we opened the second one. One of the things that I've heard in talking to clubs, and I've sort of made it my mission to help clubs make the transition and leverage my experience. But one of the things in talking to a lot of clubs that I've heard is they hear warehouse model, and nobody can really envision what a warehouse curling club can look like. They think it looks like a warehouse and isn't a curling club. And I just want to let everybody know that you can create something very, very, very close to a dedicated facility in a warehouse, especially if you find the right warehouse. But with few compromises, you can come up with a very nice club for much less than it might take to build a dedicated curling facility. So to sort of give you some examples of this, This is the first warehouse that we moved into. This is what it looked like before we did anything with it. So the top two pictures are the warehouse looking in opposite directions. Bottom left is where our locker rooms and lobby were, and the right-hand side is where our warm room ended up. Difficult for most of our members to sort of look at this empty space and envision a curling club in this. But if you've got somebody that can think and translate a space like this and envision what a curling club will look like, you can actually come up with something pretty nice. So this is the after picture of our starter home. So obviously on the right, that's the warehouse where the ice room is. On the left-hand side, the two pictures on the left, that door on the left is the same door you saw on the previous picture. And then we actually raised the warehouse up about 4 feet for the first 12 feet to give viewing area across the 3 sheets. So what looked like a pretty rundown warehouse turned into a nice, cozy, it wasn't large, a cozy 3-sheet curling club that suited us well for, for 5 years or a little more. As I said, after the 5 years, the lease was up for renewal. We totally just planned on renewing, but we said, as good stewards of the club, the board should look at other opportunities before we sign a 5-year commitment. We found that building that was 200 yards down the street. This is what it looked like before. A bit easier to envision this as a curling club because it was just one large, big warehouse with a few walls. But we were able to transition it into this 4-sheet curling club with a roughly 3,000, about 2,800 square foot warm room, including a bar, ADA bathroom, ADA changing room. The weird thing, if you've ever been to the Fort Wayne Club since we moved, is the warehouse had this little house in the front. So this old house from the 50s, probably 40s or 50s, is where our locker rooms and bathrooms are. And then there's a picture of the ice room. So, big transition, obviously, from an empty warehouse into a curling facility, but certainly one that if you didn't know any better, you might think was a purpose-built curling facility. And obviously there were a few compromises. The house portion is a bit dated, etc. But for the curling experience and the warm room experience, it's as if it was a purpose-built facility. So the question is, how did we do that? How did we accomplish this? So just as background, we were an arena club founded in 2010. Started off really well right after the 2010 Olympics. Lots of interest, 85 members curling that first season. And as some of you may know, it can be difficult to retain people in the arena model. Our ice time was 9:30 to 11:30 on Monday nights. You got done at 11:30. You had to move 1.25 tons of stones off the ice. You had to pull the hacks out. You had to do all this stuff. You got out of there about midnight. You drove home, no time for broom stacking. You drove home, got home at 12:30, and you laid in bed and stared at the ceiling until 2 o'clock when you finally got calmed down from your game and everything else. And it was tough the next morning. So we went down year over year, just tough to replenish the curlers that leave for various reasons, whether it's because of the ice quality or personal reasons or whatever else. And in fact, in 2013, we were down to 24 people actively curling. 37 members, but 24 active curlers. And we said, we got to do something. We're not going to last another 4 years unless we do something. So we made a bit of a bold move and said, we're going to move to a dedicated facility and, the Field of Dreams model, build it and they will come. So we obviously we went along that path and were successful. And this is sort of the steps that we followed. No real magic here, but I'll talk through some of the details and some of the gotchas and some of the things that we learned along the way. So obviously before you do anything, you're going to do some information gathering, and a webinar like this is one piece of that, right? What have other clubs done? What does it cost roughly to do this? What are the gotchas that you need to worry about? Things of that nature. And then from that information, you're going to build you can call it a feasibility study, you can call it a preliminary business plan, but you're going to look at how much is it going to cost to build? How much can we reasonably expect to fundraise? And then you can't forget about actually running the club after you build it. So how much is it going to cost to operate this facility on an ongoing basis? And how much revenue can the club generate on an ongoing basis? So from that, you'll build a business plan or a feasibility study, and you'll say, all right, does it make sense to continue? And if it does, you'll find a location. And once again, we're talking about the warehouse model. And there's lots that go into finding a suitable warehouse and location, and we'll drill down into that. Once you've found the location, something that you think will work, you'll finalize the business plan. You'll reach out and then do some preliminary fundraising. Now that you have something concrete, you'll be talking to your members about, specifically, get them excited about it, and start to figure out how much money you can really raise. At the start, it's, yeah, I'll give you this. And then at the end, it's, yeah, I'm giving you this, whether they're actually giving you the money or just documenting in writing that they're going to give you this money if you move forward. And then you've got to make the decision. And that's, that's a big hurdle to get over, is getting everybody on board to actually make the decision. But let's walk through some of these steps. So information gathering, what we did, and once again, this is our way of doing it. Others have done it differently. Some may well have done it better. But first was to sort of spec out what a typical build out would cost. We talked, when we did the warehouse model back in 2013, I'm only aware of 2 that had done the warehouse model previous to us, Portland, the Evergreen Curling Club in Portland, Oregon, and the Columbus, Ohio Club. So we reached out to both of those clubs and talked to them, got a reference to Jim Hibbard from Central New York Refrigeration Service and Design, who had installed the ice mat system for them. And we'll talk more about the details of that later. And then, we had a member who was in the construction business, so talk to him about what the build out might look like and what it might cost. And yeah, we did go down the path of starting with a purpose-built facility, had plans drawn up, had quotes done, and then just couldn't get comfortable with the budget that we could raise that much money. So once we had the rough cost, we went out and surveyed our membership to make sure people were on board, get their interest level, ask them how much they would donate to a dedicated facility, ask them how much they would loan if we were going to move forward. We didn't really have to do this, but if you're in a larger city, you probably need to start to assess locations and ask where people would go. So if you're in a city like Atlanta with big traffic, if you're on the north side, the people on the south side probably aren't going to show up, right? So you need to sort of assess where the areas to look for a location would be that wouldn't too much adversely impact your membership, et cetera. The other thing we did is we really looked at who had skills and licenses that we could use to reduce our costs. So who in our club, was a general contractor or worked for a general contractor, who had carpentry skills, who had electrical skills, all those sorts of things. I always make it a point to understand and know what every member of my club does for a living, because I may well want to tap into their expertise to do something. Then the other things we did is inquired about volunteer support. How much time can you volunteer to help build a club? Because a big part of our piece was reducing the cost of the build out by having volunteers do a bunch of the work, that which they could do. Can't do everything. You need to have licensed electricians, you need to have licensed plumbers, blah, blah, blah. But there's still a lot of work that can be done. Demolition, building our catwalks around our ice, painting, drywall finishing if we so chose to do that, those sorts of things. So you're going to need a lot of volunteer time, and you want to make sure you're not going into this expecting volunteers and then have nobody show up. And then also, how much volunteer time can you get to operate the club on an ongoing basis? Nothing worse than building a club and then finding out that nobody's willing to volunteer the time to operate it. So we asked all those questions. We got very strong support for moving forward, got commitment from people to volunteer, and we got commitment from people to give money, actually more than we expected. And then we sort of modeled what our membership and revenue would look like after the move to dedicated ice. How many members did we think we could get to? How many corporate events could we run? How many bonspiels? How many challenge cups? How many learn to curls, etc. And we're able to then use that to then build sort of a pro forma. So once we did the information gathering, and part of that was also what might it cost to rent the space. We needed to think about, what we needed in a location. And I know there were some questions on this submitted in advance. How big a space do you need? So for the ice room, you're going to want about 160 feet. You can do with a little bit less than that. The ice surface is generally about 148, 145 feet. You're going to want optimally some catwalks on either side so you can step off the ice. So we aimed for about 160 feet. I think our first facility was 159 when we built it, and the other one was about 161. And you're going to want, depending on the number of sheets, you're going to want roughly 15 feet per sheet. And then you're going to want 10 feet extra optimally. Once again, if all you can do is 15 feet per sheet, and then you're at the walls, there's clubs out there that have no catwalks on the side. But optimally, for new curlers to be able to step off the ice and to have some place for storage, you may want to be storing beer kegs out there, club brooms, things of that nature. You'll probably want a little more space. You're also going to want to look for space for an ice maintenance room, someplace to store your scraper, optimally away from where a random learn to curler is going to wander over and start messing with it. And also just to pretty up the ice room, to not have all of the ice maintenance equipment sitting around. You're going to want changing rooms, give the ability of people to change clothes. A warm room, obviously, optimally, that's going to be at the end of the sheet. That's going to give you the best view. There are clubs out there, quite a few that have the warm room on the side. And with streaming technology being what it is, there's things out there. So I know Jim from Indy, from the Circle City Curling Club is there. They're going to have their warm room on the side. Cincinnati does, Portland does. But the optimal viewing area is going to be at the end of the sheet. You're going to want a kitchen space if you can get one to be able to cook during bonspiels. You're going to want space for a bar and potentially a keg cooler, someplace to put your kegs as opposed to, you could use a kegerator, but you can get more beers on tap, etc. if you've got a cooler for that. And you're going to want storage space, place to put things so the place doesn't look cluttered. And the other thing you're going to have to do is assess ADA issues. So how easy it is for somebody to get in there with a wheelchair. Depending on your locality, you may have to comply with ADA rules to be a public building and allow the general public to come in. For us, we could have decided to be a private club and not be open to the public for learn to curls and things of that nature, and we would not have had to comply with ADA. But I really, really recommend not going that route and looking at ADA compliance up front. It can create some challenges and some additional cost, but it'll be well worth it in the end. So once you have, a sense for the size you're looking for and everything else, that can factor into your cost for the, for renting a space or buying a space, etc. So then we built out a preliminary business plan. You can also call it a feasibility study. And these columns are separate columns, so don't look at two items next to one another and think they're related. So the first thing we looked at was the build out cost. What's it going to cost to build a facility? And what I've listed here in parentheses is our costs. And from the two different facilities, generally, I just took the higher of the two. except the ice system. We did move our existing most of our existing ice technology from one facility to the other. We did have to replace a few things. So I added those two together, and that's probably a little higher because the low E ceiling, as an example, we bought it twice. So there's two low E ceilings in that cost. But if you look at this in total, we had about $477K in build out costs. I think the first time we did it, it was 350, and the second time it was, you know, a little over 300, but the second time was not buying a new ice system, etc. But you got to factor into your proposal, you know, what it's going to cost to make ice using, you know, the chiller, ice mats, or whatever technology you're going to use to do that. You're going to want a dehumidifier. Some clubs have opened without a dehumidifier and struggled with ice quality. I mean, it's possible. If it's the only way to do it, fine, but you're going to want a dehumidifier to have quality ice. Low E ceiling, we did that. Not all clubs do, some don't. You're going to have to deal with electrical. There's going to be electrical work to hang lights, to power your chiller, to rig up your dehumidifier, all of those sorts of things. You're going to have some mechanical, some plumbing and HVAC work. Depending on the state of your warehouse when you move in, it could be more or less. Fire detection and suppression, that's a key thing, and we'll talk about that a little later. That's something to definitely keep an eye on and make sure you're on top of. And then lots of other expenses there. I won't walk through everything. So then the next piece was the funding sources. Where are we going to get the money to make this happen? Lots of different sources. I've bolded the top four. That's largely where most clubs get their money. Lots of people. Yes, go ahead, Gwen. You've got a question? You're on mute.
Unmute. Okay. So for funding, for those who are on this call from the GNCC, we have a legacy trust loan that is available to any arena club that has been in operation for 5 years or more. And it will help you transition from arena to dedicated ice. It's not the starting point, it's to get you over the finish line. So Charlotte and Pittsburgh, Charlotte had a $50,000 loan, Pittsburgh had a $75,000 loan from us. It's a 5-year, 3% flat interest rate, no pre-penalty payment. And it helps with the things that the bank isn't interested in helping you fund. Things like your warm room, the dehumidification system. For Charlotte, it was their heaters. They thought they were in South Carolina. They didn't need to have heaters. Surprise, they needed them. Pittsburgh, the bank was not interested in any amenities for the warm room. That's where the legacy fund kicked in. So for those clubs who are here on this call from the GNCC, keep that in mind. It is to help you get the finish line.
Awesome. Thanks, Gwen. Wish we had the advantage of that. So definitely take advantage of that if you need to. So one word of caution. I've talked to clubs, and they've in the past who have talked about how they're gonna find a company that's going to give them a bunch of money, or they're going to write for all these grants to get a bunch of money. Just be aware, most grants specifically exclude capital projects and are generally for programs. So it's tough to get a grant to build a facility. Corporate sponsorships can be tough, especially if you're in a part of the country where curling is not well known and widely accepted. I personally would be very hesitant to put much trust in any business plan that had any less than 90% of their funding coming from those four sources listed there at the top. The reality is the majority of your money is going to come from your members and perhaps a loan from a bank or the World Curling Federation. One of the things we did that to help fund our second facility was lifetime memberships. So for $10,000, you could get a lifetime membership to the club. So you wouldn't have to pay again for regular curling. You still pay for bonspiels, etc. Limited number of those made available by the board. So we did 5 of them for the construction of our most recent facility and raised $50,000. And then when COVID hit, we did one more to help the financial situation around COVID. So we've only sold 6 of them. And if I made 3 more of them available right now, I'd probably sell out all 3. You need to be a little bit careful because you are mortgaging your future, but it's a creative way to generate some income. And if you're confident in your growth potential, you can do that with a reasonable number of those being made available. But, go ahead, Gwen. You're on mute again.
Yeah, sorry. Those of you who are considering a WCF loan, you need to be aware that the WCF loan is available only through the USCA, and they tack on an administrative fee. I would not consider that a viable option. There are other ways.
So actually, Gwen, there was no administrative fee associated with ours. There was a little bit of legal, and maybe it's changed since we got that 3 years ago.
It has changed.
Okay. The challenge we had with the WCF loan, because it goes through the USCA, is they have a pretty stringent collateral requirement where you have to have 100% of the funds that you want in a bank account in liquid funds, meaning cash, or 105 or 112% in marketable securities. And to be honest, if you have 100% of the money in funds in the bank, why do you need the loan?
Exactly. And then as of 2021, it's not spelled out clearly in the documents, but if you read the fine print, there is an administrative fee tacked on by the USCA. So that's an option that if you can avoid it at all possible costs, I would recommend that.
Yeah, so we actually did get a WCF loan for our last facility, but we did it a little bit creatively. I'm going to talk a little bit more about our special needs program in a little while, but we actually have an organization that funds our special needs curling program, and we approached them about, since they had millions of dollars sitting in the bank, this foundation. We said, look, we want to build a facility. We need a loan. There's a collateral requirement. Would you put money aside, some of your money aside in a different bank account? We had worked with them for quite a few years. They had confidence in us and our ability to deliver on this, and they were willing to do that. It's a nice loan in that it's 0% interest, 10-year loan with the first 3 years no payments due, up to $50,000 per sheet that you put in. But there is that collateral requirement. We only did 25 grand per sheet because we didn't want to, we were retiring another loan that the payment amount would be the same amount in essence, but it is going to be a difficult loan for most clubs to be able to get because of that collateral requirement.
Yeah.
So for the build out, we looked at those 2 things. Then on the ongoing, what's it cost to operate the club and what's the revenue look like? So I gave you our numbers from the past year. We are in a fairly low cost in Fort Wayne, a fairly low cost city. Some people in other cities will fall off their chair when they see rent for $2.50 a square foot per year. Others might be on par, but certainly, the Charlottes, the San Franciscos, the Pittsburghs of the world are not going to see a rent at that level. The other important thing to note is electric. We're paying 19 to 26 grand a year in electric. That's over the last 3 or 4 years. Electric rates vary significantly from geography to geography. So I gave you the number of kilowatt hours per year there. You should look up what your kilowatt hour rate is and multiply that to figure out what your electric cost would be and not just rely on that 19 to 26,000. I also later have the monthly, it's about 14,000 a month average during the season that our electric bill is. So 14,000 kilowatt hours, that is 14,000 kilowatt hours per month on average during the season. A little bit higher when you put in the ice because there's greater burden on the chiller, etc. Then Property taxes, so that was actually a gotcha from my standpoint. I went into this a bit naively, thinking we're a 501c3, we won't have to pay property tax. Submitted the property tax exemption, it got rejected. I went in front of our assessor and they're like, yeah, the only way you get your property tax exempted is if you are providing a service. Sorry, I just noticed somebody was looking to get in. If you are providing a service that the city or county would otherwise have to provide. And we tried, but it was tough to make the case that the city or county would have to provide curling. So, check with your locality to see if you will have to pay property taxes. That's obviously in a purchase scenario. If you're going to purchase a warehouse, if you're renting, it will be baked into your rent, most likely either directly or the triple net portion of your lease. So there's some of our other expenses there that basically outlines the vast majority of what our expenses look like. And then there's the operating revenue, where are you going to get money from? I think the only thing, most of that is pretty standard, and you would probably build yourself. The one thing I would caution you about is off-season use of the facility. In theory, whether or not you'd ever get caught for it, I don't know. But in theory, under a 501c3, only the revenue generating activities that you do that are related to your 501c3 mission are tax exempt, and anything else you do. So if you rent out your facility for pickleball during the summer or something like that, in theory, the IRS could tax you on that revenue. So just be aware of that before you expect to generate a lot of revenue via some other off-season use.
Craig?
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the difference between a gross lease and a triple N lease?
Sure. So you have different types of lease. You have a gross lease where sort of everything's baked in. Then there's a single net, double net, and triple net lease. I think, triple net is what we saw. And essentially you're paying additionally for the cost of property insurance, taxes, and maintenance. So you have your regular month, your regular lease amount, and then you have an incremental amount that you're paying in addition to cover those three things: the property tax, property insurance, and maintenance. Our situation when we were renting, we were in a complex that had 5 or 6 other businesses in there, and they allocated those incremental costs based on square footage. So we had X percent, I think it was like 15% of those incremental costs were allocated to us. That means when they go 1 year and fix the roof, or they go 1 year and resurface the parking lot, that's an incremental cost that gets passed back to you, at least your percentage of that, if it's not 100%. So just be aware when you are going into a lease, what type of lease it is. So once again, ours was a triple net lease, and essentially you paid for all 3 of those things. I don't recall offhand. I think triple net is the one that includes maintenance. I think the single net is the taxes, double net is taxes and insurance, and triple net is taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Where a gross lease all of that would be bundled into your lease amount, and you wouldn't have any incremental cost. Does that cover it, Russell?
I think it does, Craig. I think it does.
Excellent. So finding a location in the warehouse model, that can be a challenge. Curling sheets are by definition very long and not very wide, and it can be tough to find a suitable warehouse size. So a number of things to do. First, as I said before, find regions in your city that are optimal, acceptable, and not acceptable. And it could be due to high crime, or it could be just where your people are willing to travel to. But figure out, where you'd love to be, where would be optimal for you, and then where would be acceptable. Real estate agents can be challenging in this. They get calls all the time from people wanting to open gymnastics clubs, or this sort of club or that sort of club, and have been burned multiple times. So what we found was useful was to prove our financial viability right up front. So we put our willingness to do guarantees up front, and some of our business plan in front of a realtor. Finally, after we found, after we worked with a few that really didn't do anything. But once we did that, we found an agent that was willing to work for us. Optimally, if you have a realtor that's a member of your club, a commercial realtor, that's great. If not, if you have somebody in your club that knows a commercial realtor, certainly leverage that. Then have every single member of your club casing every warehouse in the city. It's been years, but I still drive past any building and go, yeah, I could put a curling club in there. So be looking everywhere. We went through 50 locations. We didn't visit 50 locations. We visited probably 20, but we were looking at online, 50 different warehouses that were close to working to find one that finally worked. So once you find a facility, and if you're going to lease, just some things to think about as you negotiate the lease. Don't sign a 20-year lease. Sign a 5-year lease with some 5-year pre-negotiated renewals. That gives you flexibility. If we had signed a 15-year lease at the outset, we wouldn't be in our new facility. But because we signed a 5-year lease with pre-negotiated 5-year renewals, essentially we had negotiated that the rent at the next term would only go up by the cost of living with a cap on it. Definitely try to get a cap put in there, especially with the market, the inflationary rate that we're dealing with right now. But try to negotiate that. We were able to negotiate a construction allowance. The landlord gave us $12,500 to help with build out. It's all going to depend on the market you're in, right? The market wasn't great when we went into that facility. The facility had been vacant for 3 years, so they were willing to deal. So we're able to get about $12,500 construction allowance. In the first year we moved in, we occupied in January. We only had 3 months or 4 months until the summer hit, so we were concerned. So we actually structured the first year so that lease payments were only due during the curling season. Essentially, that spreads half the cost of the summer to the back, to the fall. I actually wish I had done that for the entire term of the agreement, because essentially you've got to bank enough money to make it through the summer during the season. And by structuring it otherwise, you're paying a little bit more each month, but half of the summer cost is deferred into the fall. Also get approval of all the modifications you make before signing the lease. The last thing you want to do is make some changes to accommodate the curling facility, and then when you move out, them hit you with huge costs because you've altered the warehouse or the facility that you're in. And lastly, and this can be one of the most challenging things, most landlords are going to require some sort of financial guarantee. They're going to want to be sure that you're going to pay the loan. You likely won't have much of a credit rating or anything like that. So they're going to want some of your members to sign up for a financial guarantee. They're going to make those jointly and severally liable. So they're going to want multiple people. And by jointly and severally liable, that means that they can go after any person that they choose for the full amount. So even though you have 4 people providing guarantees, they're going to look for the doctor or the lawyer or whoever they think they can get the money out of, and they're going to go after them for the full amount. So that's going to make it tougher for you to get people to sign up. So if you can negotiate that it's not jointly and severally liable, then go ahead and do that. The other thing I would do is, if you're doing a 5-year lease with additional 5-year renewals, we were able to say, look, we'll give you the guarantees for the first 5 years. But after that, if we've done 5 years, you should no longer need a guarantee because we've paid successfully for 5 years. So remove the guarantee after that. So we ended up we had a guarantee in our lease. My wife and I did it ourselves because we didn't feel comfortable going to the rest of the club. So we did the guarantee ourselves, and it was, after the term, if we had renewed the second term, we would not have had the guarantee in place. So if the club had failed, we wouldn't personally be on the hook. We doing okay time-wise, Russell?
I think so.
Okay. So then what, right? You've built a feasibility plan. You've done your research. You've built a feasibility plan study that says, yeah, we can make this work. We found a location that looks pretty good. You really need to finalize a business plan. So, business plan you should be able to put in front of anybody and have them read it, not a curler, because everybody, the curlers are going to be biased, but you should be able to put it in front of somebody that's unbiased, and they should come away with the belief that, yeah, the club can do this, and they should do this. So, once again, I'm not saying ours is the perfect model, but when we put it together, we talked about what the current challenges are on arena ice, what the benefits of dedicated ice are, why we're doing it now. So when we did it, we were trying to be in before the Olympic cycle, before the Olympics started. We talked a lot about the history of the club, and the purpose of that was to demonstrate successes that we've had. We had hosted arena nationals. We'd hosted big tournaments. We'd hosted, a cash spiel that had, Eve Muirhead and Bingyu Wang from China and all the U.S. women's Olympic team. So we've done a bunch of things that demonstrated success, and whatever it is that your club has done, put that in there. The more you can show that we've been successful in other things we do will lead people to believe you'll be successful going forward. We talked about our priorities. So our priority at that point was, when we first built our business plan, we had a concept known as legal ice. We were going to build a facility that had ice in it that we could legally occupy. And that was the minimum. And then after that, we would do everything else. Now, we were more successful in our fundraising and we're able to build the facility out at the outset. But our concept going into that to keep costs low is, we're going to build a facility. We're going to do the minimum required to get in there to have ice and be legally able to occupy the building. And over time, we would build out the warm room. And that's certainly a viable option. Better if you can build it all, but it's, building legal ice that, doesn't have much of a warm room or any warm room, or, a warm room that isn't outfitted with carpets and chairs and all this other stuff, is still better than curling on arena ice. Then we talked about the startup cost, what the costs were to build a facility, what the ongoing operational costs were, how we were going to mitigate some of these costs. So we were going to leverage club members and their relationships to reduce costs through volunteering and in-kind sponsorships. So, interesting thing that we did in both of our build outs. Both of our build outs, we had somebody in our club or a friend. So, there was the first time around, it was a friend of mine who had done a learn to curl and was interested, but couldn't really afford to curl, but he worked for a general contractor. And I approached him and said, look, if you help us get this facility built, we'll let you curl for free for 3 years. So we were able to leverage his company's general contracting license, and he provided the construction expertise. And to be honest, it was, 12 total idiots holding sledgehammers and one guy going, oh my God, what did I get myself into? When we did some of the demolition, we literally, there was a room in the back, had a ceiling and walls, and we were taking down the walls and hadn't taken down the ceiling yet. And he had to jump in and stop us and re-support it so that we took it down the right way. But we were able to leverage his experience and his company's general contracting license. So to be honest, that probably saved us $30,000. And the funny thing is, when we built the other facility 5 years later, there was a different person that was a member of our club that also worked for a general contracting firm. And I actually didn't have to give him free curling. I just convinced him to do it. And we gave their company a sponsorship, a 5-year sponsorship. So custom rings, the houses are their logo in it and stuff like that. So we got to use their license, etc. So find any contacts you have, any people. In fact, one of the things I suggest doing later is think about this. Think about giving a discounted, either promote or give a discounted private event to construction companies. Maybe find 2 construction companies that are big rivals and give 2 sheets worth of a corporate event to one of those companies, 2 to the other, teach them to curl, have them play against each other at the end. If you get a few curlers from those construction companies interested in curling, then you can leverage them as you go in to build a new facility. Or maybe it's electricians, or maybe it's HVAC, or maybe it's plumbing, whatever. But, you know, to do a corporate event or something along those lines to interest people in that field in curling, you can then leverage that as you go into constructing a new facility.
So Craig,
Yeah.
just want to add one thing about the business plan.
Yep.
You want to think about when you're putting together your business plan, who your audience is. So Pine Tree has a great business plan. It looks very appropriate for sending it to the World Curling Federation type of scenario, but that may not be the business plan that you want to share with your bank or some other people that people may not ever read through most of it. So you just want to think about who your audience is at any given point in time when you're sending out a business plan.
Absolutely. You need an unbiased reader, a non-curler, to be able to look at that and understand it. You may create a condensed version for the World Curling Federation or your board, but you know, to put in front of potential sponsors, grantors, whoever, banks, you're going to want something that really speaks to why curling is good, the sportsmanship, the socialization, and all of those sorts of things. So then the rest of the business plan was on the revenue side, how we were going to get the startup capital to build it, what the operating revenue looked like, where we were going to get new members, what our pricing was going to look like, how many leagues we were going to run, how many private events, etc. And we built a 5-year pro forma income statement. So pro forma just means we projected out, we estimated, we made some assumptions, and we said, this is where we think we're going to get to if we're successful. And we documented all those assumptions. So we're going to get X number of members a year, you know, new members, and then an Olympic year, we're going to get Y number of new members. We're going to be able to run this many events, and it's going to increase year over year as people learn more about curling and the availability of the club and things of that nature. So we finalized that business plan. So at this point, we've got a finalized business plan. We've got member commitment from the member survey originally. Oh, another thing on when you actually find the location before you sign the lease, I recommend requesting the ability to hold an open house for your members to come out and see the facility before you actually sign the lease. We did that for both our facilities, and it gets the excitement going. People come in and see the facility, talk to them about how it's going to be. People get excited about it. So we've, you know, found a location, we've built this business plan, we've been working, we were either on the board or working with the board all along. Now we've got to go to the board and get the final decision to move forward. If you're going into your decision and there's a lot of doubt about whether it's going to be approved, then that's a problem, right? You should have been working with your board all along. You should have been engaging with your members to make sure they're committed to it still. You're going to go into that board meeting with strong documented support from your members. You're going to have reliable build-out costs that include contingency. So make sure you're including about a 20% contingency in your budget for the build-out. Hopefully you've got committed funds for members that cover, or from probably not members here, but you've got committed funds from whatever source for at least 80% of the build-out costs. You can go into that knowing that it's going to take you a while, a period of time. You may not go in with 100% funding. You're going to want at least 80%, hopefully 90%, and know that once the construction starts, people will get excited and you may be able to generate more revenue, more donations. You'll have a team identified to lead the build out that have some experience and knowledge. You'll have your contractors identified and quotes in hand, and you'll have your site identified and perhaps even under a letter of intent. Optimally, you're going to the board and you're saying, this is the thing, and we've got a letter of intent, and we've got 30 days to get a lease signed, etc. So then, so a few key takeaways from that process. And this is something I tell to every arena club I talk to. Make today if you're going to build a dedicated facility in 1, 2, 3, 5 years from now, work to find ways to make your club an asset to your community, and do that now. Nobody wants to give a bunch of guys that throw stones down the ice and drink beer money. But if you're doing stuff with juniors, if you're doing stuff with the disabled, if you're doing stuff with the elderly, if you're doing stuff for veterans, any of those things, that's a story that you can talk to people about, and they'll be willing, much more willing to open their wallets. So find somebody in your club that's passionate about something. My wife and I founded the club because we have a son with autism, and we're all about, you know, intellectual and physical disabilities. So, oh, go ahead, Gwen. Still on mute.
Sorry. The other thing you probably would like to talk to people about, talk to your local schools about school programs, an after-school teenager junior program. Talk to your senior center about a Monday morning or Wednesday morning, sometime in the morning, league for seniors, because that brings more revenue into your club. It brings more interest into your club. It gets the community more involved in the club.
Absolutely.
Talk to any local colleges in the area about a collegiate program, because there is a national collegiate program that they could then become involved with. And this not only brings more curlers into your club, but it utilizes ice time that you probably aren't utilizing for your normal members' activities, because it's off ice, it's during the day.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're doing it now, when you're an arena club, right, the cost is an issue, and
You can't do it.
Availability of ice time, but do it, the elderly, you know, seniors, whatever stuff that you can do during the day, disabled individuals, even, you know, people potentially that work on second shift. Your ice facility, at least ours, was much more willing and very open to donating ice time during the day when nothing was going on, for something that was benefiting. For us, it was special needs, but it could be whatever. But if you can find ice time during the day and approach your club about doing something during the day, and approach your facility and have them donate the time, you know, you can make yourself an asset to the community, and that helps you raise funds. Yes, Gail.
The Ardsley Curling Club has the Roma League, which is really old men's association. Sorry, but that's what they call themselves. They play 6 ends in the morning on Monday and Wednesday, and then they go to lunch. But it generates revenue for the club, and they have a social league. There are other clubs that will have a ladies' daytime league for those who are retired. I mean, there's a lot of uses for your ice during the day when most of your members aren't available to curl. You need to think about that and take advantage of it. I know one club that has a veterans league, which are mostly disabled veterans, and most are wheelchair bound. They have an afternoon league prior to the regularly scheduled leagues of that club.
Yeah.
So, I mean, be creative. There's a lot of ways to use your ice in the off time. A number of clubs have after school leagues from that 3 to 5 time frame, where school is out, but your normal adult leagues don't start until maybe 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Use that 3 to 5 time frame for a school league.
So Craig, I think you got about 15 more minutes to go through the slides, and that'll leave us 15 minutes for questions.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yep. So I'll just talk real quick about our special needs program and one quick anecdote about it. So as I said, my wife and I founded the club because we have a son with autism, and we found that this was a sport that he could play with us. It's the whole reason we got into curling. It's the whole reason we started the club. It's the whole reason we built a dedicated facility. We got a local foundation that focuses on people with disabilities and enriching their lives. They've funded this program. It generates about $20,000 a year in revenue for the club. We actually, they supported the WCF loan, as I mentioned. They gave us the collateral. And in fact, when we went and talked to the owner of our current facility about purchasing the facility, we had $10,000 in the bank. We had no plans to move. I went in and talked to him about a special needs program. Turns out he has a 30-year-old son with autism, and he bent over backwards. So I pardon my French, but I shit you not, we bought a $520,000 building for $7,500 down. He financed it himself at the commercial interest rate because I didn't think we could get a bank loan. And I said, look, it's going to cost us $300,000 to $400,000 to build this thing out. I don't know yet that we can get there. We're going to need some time. He waited 5 months and he turned down cash offers in the interim to allow us to get into this facility. We would not have our current facility if we did not run a program like this. You cannot imagine the benefits to your club if you do something. It doesn't have to be special needs. It can be veterans, disabled veterans. There's grant money out there for that stuff. There's grant, money for seniors. There's grant money for stuff. All of this stuff can be funded and is going to be a benefit to your club. So once again, I can't stress highly enough, if you're an arena club, think about doing something that makes you an asset to the community, and you're not just curling, you're doing curling to improve your community. And that's gonna pay dividends tenfold. All right, so real quick, how do you build interest in dedicated ice from your members? Take your members to bonspiels on dedicated ice. Perhaps if you're thinking of the warehouse model, find a well-done warehouse model club in your area and take them to that. Talk to them about the minimal setup and breakdown time, right? How many of your members are actually carrying the stones out, and how many of them are sitting in the bar at your facility or showing up late, right? It's 20% probably that are doing all the work. Talk to them. There's no setup time, right? There's an ice team at that point that are volunteer that you show up and you curl. You've got better times. You actually have practice time, and you can run more and learn to curls in private events. So talk to your members about that. For your business plan, I talked about property taxes. You're going to likely have that unless you're luckier than I am. But have confidence that your membership is going to grow. I'll get in a slide or two, I'll get to our numbers. Our size basically tripled when we went from arena ice to dedicated ice. I've talked about the key capabilities, finding people that have skills in your club, know what all your members do for a living. Go to construction companies and offer them a discounted private event in order to get somebody from them interested in curling. Keep your committee and board small. You can get stuck in analysis paralysis if you've got too many people. Trade private events for discounted prices on construction. So we got a lot of our construction, especially on our first facility, discounted by saying, hey, we'll do you a corporate event once we open. And you're going to find people in your club that have strong project management skills, sales skills, because you're going to be talking, you're going to be talking up the curling club. You're going to be talking about sponsorships, etc. Find who has negotiation skills, and probably most importantly, find who has carpentry skills, because carpenters are expensive. And if you can do it in-house, you're going to save a lot of money. Watch your contractors like a hawk. Framing, I had one contractor that put the same wall in the wrong place twice, and I had to call them out on it. Electric, the electric company put in a line that's probably 200 feet from the pole, and they did it the wrong voltage. So watch that stuff. Fire suppression and detection is always a challenge. So we have a low E ceiling in both of our facilities. We found in the first facility, after we dropped the sprinkler heads down below that level, that because the low E ceiling doesn't go wall to wall, that we actually have to sprinkle above it as well. When we moved into the new facility, asked our architect, hey, we've got smoke detectors down below the low E ceiling. Do we have to have smoke detectors up above? No, you should be fine. Well, I didn't trust him, and I called the fire inspectors to come out and tell me, and they said, nope, you got to do it up above. And that creates some challenges. I won't spend the time, but there's a certain system that you can get that I would recommend if you're gonna go smoke detectors and a low E ceiling. And then invest heavily in sealing your ponds. So that's, you know, the basin that your water is going to sit in. Ours leaks in both places, both facilities it leaked. You know, I wish I had a good answer for you on how to do that, but water's going to find a way out. So just be aware of that. The interesting story was Portland. When they built their facility, their next door neighbor was the storage for the local art museum. Leaking into our place where we leaked into, it was just another small warehouse where somebody just had a couple of machines. Wasn't a big deal, but leaking into the art museum storage facility would be a significant issue. Just some key facts for those that are going down the trail of moving to dedicated ice. You know, here's what our chiller is. We use propylene glycol. It's a 52 nominal ton chiller running propylene glycol 40% through the CalMac ice mats. There's other ice technology out there for sure, but we've used the ice mats in both of our facilities. There's what are the specs on our dehumidifier. There's the details on our low E ceiling. The smoke detection system that I talked about that goes up above the low E ceiling. That's the VESDA system. Happy to talk about it with anybody offline. And then the LED lighting that we used. So hopefully as you're looking to put together an estimate of prices and what you're going to need, hopefully this will be helpful to you. This is sort of our club by the numbers. So the blue line is our membership. So you can see we year over year decreased significantly in the arena model because of bad hours, bad ice, etc. We jumped up significantly when we moved into our starter home. We jumped up again when we hit our permanent home, and like everybody, we got screwed during COVID, but we are rebounding. So our peak was 108 members curling. So actually back to Gwen, what you said before everybody else joined, when we built the club, the first starter home, we had 24 members. We had 37 members, 24 active curlers. And that's when we said, we got to do something, right? So we did the Field of Dreams model, build it and they will come. We had a few members that were fairly generous in helping us get it built. We were successful. We jumped from 24 members up to 72 or so. Continued growth. 1 year with a slight anomaly, but you should expect year over year growth in a dedicated facility, and a bigger growth during an arena year. Yes, Gwen?
Craig, because you're helping the Grand National so much with this, my mentor program has a couple of programs for you on membership, retention, and recruitment. So talk to me offline about that.
Sure.
But every member of the Grand National who's on this knows that we have this program available to them, and it does help.
Are you there, Craig?
Craig? I think we lost Craig.
He'll come back.
Yep.
So the other thing,
I think Craig is still, yep, there he is.
he's in and out.
Craig, you're on mute.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, you can. All right. I
Yes.
can't hear you for some reason, but my jobber speaker went out. All right. So unfortunately, I can't hear. So if there's a chat item, go ahead and put it in, or if you need to ask a question, put it in chat. I apologize. Hopefully my jobber will come back. Hold on, let me try it again. Are you there?
Yep.
Nope,
So
not
Craig,
hearing.
what I had
Okay.
said is for
No
the
worries.
members, for the
I
GNCC.
will continue on.
Can you hear us?
Not sure why.
Doesn't sound that
All
way.
right, so you can hear me, right? Thumbs
Yes.
up. You can hear me? Okay, good, great. So these are our numbers. 96 curlers this year, almost up to the 108, which was our peak. Little more numbers here from year-over-year membership. I don't have data for every line item from the early years, but here's the number of bonspiels we run, challenge cups, corporate events. So you can see, like last year, we went crazy from a corporate event standpoint and ran 57 corporate events over the course of the year. And we had 80 curlers in our special needs program. I do think that's the largest such program in the United States. We've got 52 rookies, etc. So then we get to questions. I really wish I could get you guys back on sound.
We can hear you.
All right. So number of questions that were submitted. And I'm not even sure if I see the chat, if you bring stuff up. Oh, there we go. Overall square footage of the warehouse. Our first warehouse was 11,189 square feet. Our second one was a bit larger, about 13,000 square feet. The electrical needs, people asked about the, let's see, I'll go back to actually a couple of questions. Percentage of the build out costs that were provided by members. The first one was probably 90%. Second one was probably about 60%, but the rest was WCF loan. If you guys are okay with me leaving and joining again, I can do that in 2 seconds if you'd like, because it would be better for me to hear. Dan suggested that. Should I do that? Russell, give me a thumbs up if you want me to do that, or if you just want me to continue. Okay, I apologize. I'll try to get back on real quick.
So I have a little bit of additional information I can send folks about membership. I've kind of collected from some other clubs who started in arenas and transitioned that people might find helpful. A couple other things I would say, just to say, at Green Mountain, we got hooked up with a local community mental health center and did something similar to what Craig did, where we helped them run a bonspiel as a fundraiser in arena ice. And that's another way to do what Craig did.
All right, can I hear you?
Craig?
I cannot.
Craig, we're okay.
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear you too.
All right, awesome. Go ahead. You were going to say something, Gwen?
No, I was just commenting on what Russell Frank was talking about. Green Mountain is another one of the clubs that's looking to transition, and I will work with Russell on that as well. Russell, can you talk to me offline about Green
Yeah,
Mountain?
it actually wouldn't be me, Gwen, but I can connect you with the people that are,
Oh, no, I'm already in touch with them. I didn't know
Okay.
you were part of it.
that's fine.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
All right, so somebody asked what the electrical needs are. The chiller, there are a variety of chillers out there, and in fact, our particular chiller comes in a wide variety that can accommodate almost any electrical service. Ours happens to be 3-phase, 230 volts, 60 hertz. That's a typo. But honestly, your electric company will add your required service, typically for free, if they think you're going to use enough power. So we had power added to both of our facilities, lines brought in for no additional cost. We just had to tell them what we wanted and wait for them to get it done. So as I said, we average about 14,000 kilowatt hours per month. Use that to determine what your costs would be from an electric standpoint. Critical mass membership, it's really going to vary based on, your members' willingness to donate, your city and how many people you think you can attract once you do have dedicated ice, and what model you're going after and what critical you know, what your build out costs are going to be. I didn't realize I wasn't on the video yet. Let me put myself on video. There we go. So it's really going to depend. As I said, we were 24 active curlers and 37 members when we built our facility. And, you know, we've grown up to, you know, a peak of 108. And I think, you know, I think we have capacity to be, and optimally, I'd like to be around 160 and probably not much more than 160 to give everybody the optimal draw times. And we hit our numbers real easily at 160 curlers. What sort of volunteer hours are needed? Jim Puckering may have a different answer to this, given the hours that those guys are doing. And it's a small group of people that are doing it. We did our first build out in about 3.5 months. We had 5 to 8 people there daily for 3 hours for those 3.5 months. We did our second build out in about 6 months. We once again had about 5 to 8 people there 3 times a week through, you know, for 5 months. And then the last month we were there every day. Volunteers are a big challenge, right? We would have liked to have had 12 to 15 people there. It also depends on your management, right? Are you managing the project in such a way that you have work for those people to do? Because the worst thing is actually having 12 people show up and only having work for 4, and 8 people show up and then you're like, yeah, we don't have anything for you, or you just stand around and then they don't come back. So, but volunteers can be a challenge. We would have liked more the first time we built it out. I think the way we structured things, the second build out and the amount of work we had to do, we were fine with the 5 to 8 people, but we would have liked to have more people the first time around. Yes, Gwen.
The Peachtree Curling Club changed a 3/4 hockey practice facility into 3 sheets of dedicated ice. They had 6 people, 5 hours a day for 3 months. But they had to do pretty much a tear down to the studs and start over. It was really intense. So it's going to really depend on the facility you start with. If you're dealing with a warehouse that has a refrigeration system in place, it's a lot less. If you're dealing with a hockey arena, they had some big challenges at Peachtree. It was pretty intense for them. It's going to depend on whatever warehouse facility that you find.
Exactly.
And you have to be flexible.
Yep. Or you could just have Jim and Ernie from Circle City do the whole thing themselves, which is almost what Circle City is doing.
Well, yeah, you're not quite, but close. But I would just say, I would just add that the scheduling, it is tough because you think you have a plan, but then you get a supply chain issue and things get delayed. So the schedule, just as Craig said, it's tough when you ask for a bunch of people to come out and then you have to cancel because the materials you needed weren't delivered on time. So that is, especially in these times, that is a big challenge, is trying, even if you have willing volunteers, to try and schedule the work when they're available.
Right.
And when the materials are going to be there in the right time I don't want to minimize. That's a huge challenge with lots of frustrations. And to be honest, a few times, Ernie and myself have ended up saying it's not worth the hassle. We'll spend the extra hours and do it ourselves. So, but you have to have people who are committed and who have the ability to have the time. Ernie and I are both retired and have the time and the desire to do this. But yeah, it is tough scheduling activities to meet volunteer hours availability for sure.
Yeah. Somebody asked about physical plant requirements. I'm not sure specifically what they were looking for. We need the ability to add electrical to the warehouse optimally in the ice maintenance room, so it's not in, you don't have breaker boxes, out where the curlers are. You're gonna need to have water in the ice maintenance room to be able to manage the flooding and pebble and that stuff. You're gonna need heaters in the warehouse. You can add them later. We got lucky and we're able to use in both of our facilities the existing heaters. and just put ductwork and or duct sock on them. But beyond that, there's not a lot of requirements from my perspective. Somebody asked about membership fees. We specifically went into this thinking that we were going to keep the fees exactly the same and provide a much better experience. So we basically are charging still the same thing we did 10 years ago in the arena. We charge $325 a season for one league a week. And that's 12, so $325 for 12 weeks in the fall, $325 for 12 weeks in the winter, so $650, and $500 per season, so $500 in the fall, $500 in the winter for unlimited curling. I know it's more than a lot of dedicated clubs out there that have been established for a long time, but you know, we've got costs that we need to cover, and that has not been a significant challenge for us. And the numbers work. We get a few people saying, well, we should reduce the fees, but to be honest, right, if we did a 20% reduction, is that really going to impact our membership one way or the other? It's probably not going to move the needle. Somebody asked about the planning we did, how far out we plan, and did we meet our initial projections? So we did a 5-year plan from the income, pro forma income statement in our business plan. Did we meet our initial projections? We've actually exceeded our projections almost across the board. We certainly, we exceeded our conservative fundraising numbers, and therefore we're able to do a full build out, but our growth has exceeded, with obviously with the exception of COVID, has exceeded where we expected to be. Somebody asked whether there was a document available, and there isn't that I'm aware of, but Gwen and I have committed to put some materials together to share, and hopefully, that'll be started by Gwen and I, but other clubs that have recently made the transition, like Pittsburgh, like Peachtree, can supplement that with their own perspective on things. Yes, Gwen.
I've already talked to Pittsburgh because I worked with them extensively to get their dedicated ice. I'm originally from Pittsburgh. I wanted to curl on dedicated ice in my home city. So I have some documents from them. I have documents from Peachtree because I'm a founding member down there. I will work with Craig. I'm also working with some clubs that are now working to transition. So hopefully Craig and I can come up with some documents within the next, I don't know, Craig, 6 months?
Yeah, certainly. I'm not going to spend much time on it in January. So
no, you're in Scotland with my husband on the Scots tour. That's not happening. But after you get back from Scotland,
and before,
and before, we can get started on it, and then hopefully we can have a pretty comprehensive document as a starter manual, because there's no one size fits all for any club. Every club is going to be different. But
and everybody's done cool stuff, right? So
oh yeah, absolutely.
Cincinnati has done some pretty cool stuff. They built their club for 80 to 100,000, something like that, by building the ice mats themselves. So everybody's got a cool story to bring to the table and something that they've done better than others. So if we can pool that knowledge, everybody benefits.
So Craig and I are going to try and work on it. It's going to be like a rough draft of here's what's possible, and there's a lot more out there. I mean, it's not going to be a complete document because every club is different, every area is different.
Yeah.
But we can give you some guidelines.
Absolutely right. So somebody asked about how do you pitch to your local government or municipal location about a facility, and I haven't done that. I didn't try to do that. My view is, unless you're in a place that curling's really popular, wouldn't hang your hat on that. And it also creates some challenges. You see all the time clubs that are being kicked out of curling, out of country clubs. It's happening almost on a weekly basis in Canada. It happened to Mayfield. To tie yourself to some other entity. I know Detroit has a deal with the city, and they can't get the ice until mid-October. So I would caution against going that route. But if you do, there's probably other people that are better at negotiating that sort of thing than I am. Yes, Gwen.
The one exception to that is Rocket City in Birmingham, Alabama. They are a member of the Grand National. They are on municipal land currently in an arena, but the general manager of the 3 hockey arenas there, one of which has curling, has within his 5-year plan to build dedicated ice because they have sufficient land and sufficient parking for it. So again, I don't recommend working with the municipality, but in like Birmingham's case, they're the exception to the rule.
There's always exceptions for sure, but
Craig, if I could just echo that.
yeah.
We wasted probably 2 years with various municipalities in the Indianapolis area that told a good story but never delivered. And
Right.
yeah, just be cautious. I agree with you.
Don't spend a lot of time going down that path. I think curling clubs are, if you're going to make the transition, you're going to have to do it largely on your own.
I agree.
But as Gwen said, there's always an exception to the rule. And I'll believe, in Rocket City, they haven't completed it yet, right? So
No, and they are the one and only exception I know, and it may not happen because the general manager has now left to go to a different arena complex.
Yeah.
So again, it may not happen, but he did have a really good plan. He took it to the city managers. I flew down to Birmingham to talk to them about what the Grand National could provide for them. And it was looking very positive, and now Steve has left. So I have no idea what's going to happen.
So I would just add one thing about this. It's 10 o'clock. We need to wrap it up. But in terms of the government thing, I would agree that there's probably not a lot of hot leads there. Generally, you might get some indirect help if you happen to be in an area that was being developed, that there may be some federal or state funds that go in to help create industrial parks or other entities like that. They kind of put the infrastructure in the land, but it won't help you any with the land. And most likely you're not going to find anything that's really going to be workable for you, but that's not a reason you should be in touch with your government and be knowledgeable about who they are, because it comes back to what Craig was saying earlier about you want to be known in your community as a helpful entity in your community. Eventually, you're going to need them when you go through permitting processes and things like that. And you want to be in touch with them before you start any of those processes, rather than while you're in those processes.
exactly. All right, we'll try to get this finished real quick. Number of sheets depends on your population density, how close you are to other clubs. For most locations, I'd say plan for 3 or 4 sheets. There's definitely some communities where a 2-sheet will work, but shoot for 4. 3 is definitely doable. One option is to start with 2. So Columbus, as an example, is now a 3-sheet facility, but they put 2 sheets in to start. And when they raised additional funds, they added the 3rd sheet. But every circumstance is different, but 4 is optimal. 3 is definitely doable. 2 is, a limited set of communities, unless it's just a short-term way to get to 3 or 4. Insurance, you use, given the current circumstances, I'll just skip over and just say for you in the GNCC, use GNCC. For those that don't have that insurance option, USA Curling, use that for liability. Get private insurance, for property insurance and liquor liability. Don't forget about liquor liability if you've got a bar. Get builder's insurance during construction. Mistakes happen. We had somebody, put a sledgehammer through the wrong wall where the neighbor was. And we created a waiver. So similar to a waiver for when people go on the ice, we created one for construction for our volunteers that were helping out.
Make sure every contractor that works for you has liability insurance.
Yes, good call. Forming a committee. I recommend a very small committee to get this done. Find 3 or 4 passionate individuals to pursue it, give them license to do things while reporting to the board. The larger the committee, the more they can fall into analysis paralysis. Find people that have construction expertise, project management expertise, finance, accounting expertise. And it's helpful if the committee has some personal skin in the game. If they are funding a portion of the build out, they've got a lot more credibility than somebody who's trying to convince others to do it and doesn't have skin in the game, and they don't have skin in the game themselves. Just real quick, some resources. So we personally used CNY Refrigeration and Design, Jim Hibbard. He's done a lot of clubs. He's done Portland, Columbus, Fort Wayne, Chicago, Norfolk, Connecticut, numerous other curling clubs. He gets curling. He was previously associated with Utica Curling Club. He's got, you know, he's good. He's not perfect. He's got some things you need to work around, but we've been successful with him twice, and he's helped us out in quite a few ways. I would just be cautious of companies that are pitching ice technology where they are primarily or solely focused on hockey, and they don't get curling. Somebody asked if there was a local art, you know, if there was an architect that can do this. You really need a local architect to be sure you comply with all your local building regulations and everything else. I can certainly put you in touch with ours, but the architecture work isn't significant. The real big thing is the ice technician. Gwen, you had something to say?
I did. Because I am an ice tech, I'm level 2 certified. Hockey ice is totally different than curling ice.
Yeah.
You really want to go with someone who understands curling ice, because it's a totally different science.
Yeah. Humidity doesn't matter, you know, in hockey like it does in
Oh, it
curling.
does in curling.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
where your heaters and where your dehumidifier blow and air patterns matter in curling. Having somebody that knows that stuff, having somebody that knows the right ice temperatures and things of that nature, all of that stuff is important.
it's critical. It's not important, it's critical.
Yeah.
Hockey ice and curling ice are 2 different temperatures, 2 different humidities. You really need to have someone who understands what the curlers need. I can't stress that enough.
I would say if you go with a company that is focused on hockey, you're going to end up with arena ice in a dedicated building.
Bingo. I couldn't agree more. And Charlotte found that out the hard way and spent a lot of money trying to rectify that. So you really do need to get someone who understands curling ice.
Absolutely. So I appreciate the time to speak to you guys. I know we went probably a little bit long. You've got my contact information here. Reach out with any questions. I'm happy to stay on a little longer and answer individual questions, but keep my contact information and reach out to me at any time. I've sort of made it my one thing is to share my knowledge with other clubs and help other clubs make the transition to dedicated ice. But appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys and appreciate all you guys for attending.
Craig, thank you very much for this. On behalf of the GNCC Mentor Program, this was very helpful. I will be adding you to my mentor program because we do need your expertise.
Happy to help. And just FYI, I've shared a PDF of this presentation with Russell, and hopefully he'll be sending it out to everybody or make it available and archive it within the GNCC so others that haven't attended can get access to it.
And we record these sessions and they're usually posted on YouTube. I'll leave that up to Russell, but.
Perfect.
Yeah, no,
Thanks, Dan.
yeah, so this will be posted on the GNCC ice on the training page, and then the slides will probably be on the ice support page. Probably in 2 weeks, I think it'll take get it up there. The other thing I would just say is you all have attended, we'll get an evaluation from Pete Della Pella. Probably tonight it'll show up as Pete Della 52 at Hotmail, so check your spam. We really evaluate your feedback. We like to give feedback on all these events that we do, and it's a way that you can help make them better. So I just want to thank Craig. This is great. This is just what we were trying to accomplish. We really wanted to see what interest there is out there, and it's pretty clear that there's quite a bit. So I hope you found this all very beneficial, and hopefully we'll see what happens in the future.
Russell, thank you. Thank you, everyone, Craig, everyone. Thank you for putting this on behalf of the GNCC and other clubs across the country. I think it's very beneficial. Craig, you are now a member of the GNCC mentor program, whether you want to be or not. And if you say no, Peter will beat you up the next time he sees you.
I am happy to help. Whether, I don't care who is helping, I'm just happy to help any club go along the path to dedicated ice.
Okay, I've been running the mentor program since 2007 when I started it. And one of my most pressing programs was to try and help arena clubs transition to dedicated ice. So this is a huge step for us. And I'm looking forward to working with you on putting together some documents.
Good. So I'll have a list of things that Peter will need to do for me in Scotland if I'm going to help him. So.
Oh, that's between you and Peter, not me. For those of you who don't understand, Peter and Craig are on the outgoing men's Scots Tour team, leaving in January, and they are on the exact same team. So we're stuck with each other for a really long time.
Well, I hope you guys have fun over there. I know a number of other people that are going, so I hope you can survive the month.
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll have fun. It's survival is the question.
It is.
It's a marathon. I was on the 2016 ladies tour, and Peter and I are the fourth couple across the United States to go on our respective tours. So Craig, it is a marathon. Good luck and God bless.
I'm pretty young. I'm not worried about the physical aspect. It's my liver I'm worried about, actually.
You should be. It's Scotland. They drink a lot of scotch.
Yeah.
In the morning for breakfast. Okay, it was my recollection. So
Does anybody have any questions that they want to? I'm happy to stay on for a minute or two if anybody has any questions that they want to bring up. But if not, appreciate you.
Okay. So anyone from the Grand National who has questions through the mentor program, contact me. I'm more than happy to help you. And I will work with Craig. If I don't have the answers, I have 19 mentors, and now Craig is my 20th mentor. So if I don't have the answer, someone on my team will have an answer for you. And Craig, thank you for joining the Grand Nationals mentor team.
No problem. Glad to be invited.
Thank you.
Yep.
With
All
that,
right.
I'm going to say good night.
Yep, I think it's fine. And anybody, we'll keep track of what shows up in the chat room, so we can certainly try to make sure that some of those things get addressed in the future, or we'll at least pass them on to Craig and Gwen. So listen, thanks to all of you for attending. This was very good and very successful, and I hope you have a nice evening for the rest of your evening. It's late for me. I'm ready to go to bed now, so. All right.
All right. Take it
Take
easy.
care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again, Craig.
Yep.